today in the inexplicable, unlawyered, clumsy language of this two-page order to stop all federal funding. That order directed, for example, that the Green New Deal funding must stop. The Green New Deal is a years-old piece of proposed legislation that never actually passed. The inexplicability, the sort of bumper sticker style language of the Stop All the Funding order is why so many of the initial headlines about the impact of this today focused on the confusion, the lack of clarity, nobody really having any idea what exactly the Trump administration was shutting down. And that was true in blue states, that was true in purple states, that was true in red states. As members of Congress and governors and former government officials and members of the press started putting it together, started circulating lists of all the things that this Trump order was shutting down, the White House themselves appeared to be fairly bewildered by the news that this was, in fact, the stuff that they were shutting down. Like, oh, really? We're shutting down veterans' homeless shelters? We are? We're shutting down meat and poultry inspections? We are? We're shutting down school breakfasts, school lunches. We're shutting down home heating assistance. It's January 28th. We're shutting down housing assistance, including rent vouchers, which is how people pay their rent first of the month when the rent is due is Saturday. We're shutting down food stamps, the SNAP program. Millions and millions and millions of Trump voting Americans get SNAP. Millions of Americans of all stripes. The WIC program, that's food specifically for pregnant and postpartum women and their infants. Childcare, Head Start, suicide hotlines, child abuse investigations, supporting law enforcement, rape crisis centers, Medicaid, which is health insurance for millions of Americans, including especially disabled people, old people, and, oh, by the way, it covers 40% of all births in America. And this isn't stuff that they were like proposing to not reauthorize or like asking Congress to cut. They said that money was cut off as of today. And after the Trump White House started to realize that those were all the things they had just shut down, there was a hue and cry and a huge pushback all over the country. And what happened? The Trump White House backed down and tried to say that, oh, this wasn't what they had meant to do, that no, Medicaid wasn't being shut off. Where'd you hear that? Yeah, tell that to the states that all day couldn't access any Medicaid payments. Again, after a hue and cry and huge pushback, they changed their mind, or rather changed their explanation and said, oh, no, we didn't mean that. Pell Grants and federally supported student loans, those won't be included. Well, they certainly appeared to be on the list this morning. But then after the hue and cry and the pushback, they tried to say, oh, no, they never were. The White House apparently had no idea what was going to turn off when they flipped that switch today. Shut down the government. By the way, what's the government? Ready, fire, aim. This White House had no idea what the impact was of what they were doing. And so they spent all day taking more and more and more of it back as people told them what they had just done and pushed back hard. Later in the day, they put out a new directive insisting, oh, no, we didn't mean food stamps. SNAP isn't being stopped. Oh, we didn't mean that. Oh, and neither are funds for small businesses and funds for farmers and Pell Grants and Head Start and rental assistance, quote, and other similar programs. Anything that sounds good that people might get mad about, we didn't mean that. We just meant government, which sucks, right? We didn't mean all the stuff that people use and like and need. The bad news is they are trying to delete the government. They are trying to get rid of all federal employees. Just throwing a brick through the window on everything the government does. Their aims appear to be as bad or worse than anybody predicted or imagined, even after they picked J.D. Vance. That's the bad news. But the good news is that they're bad at what they're doing, and that there is loud and outraged pushback. And it is pushing them back. The pushback is happening all across the country, red states and blue states. We are about to see the impact of that in Washington. Democrats in the House today called an in-person emergency all-hands-on-deck in Washington meeting tomorrow to plan a response that they say includes not just legislation and communication, but also litigation. That emergency all-hands-on-deck meeting today called by Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House. Today, a lawsuit brought by Democracy Forward has blocked the funding freeze already. It is blocked at least until next week. You know the group Indivisible? They've been doing big, impressive organizing meetings all over the country this week. Look at these pictures of their numbers that are turning out at their meetings right now. These organizing meetings, again, all over the country. Indivisible is calling on Democratic senators in response to what Trump has just done, telling them what Trump has just done here in this last couple of days is so extreme. This is so bad. Democratic senators need to not wait to see what else he's going to do. They actually need to take relatively extreme action in response right now. Indivisible is calling on Democratic senators to, quote, oppose all nominees until Trump reverses the freeze, to deny unanimous consent in order to slow down Senate proceedings, to vote no on all cloture votes, to, quote, force quorum calls at every opportunity. They say, quote, Trump is daring anyone to stop him as he seizes power, ignoring Congress and rewriting laws by decree. They say, quote, we need Democrats to use every procedural maneuver to grind things to a stop and use every media tool to raise alarm and allow public pressure to build. Quote, shut down the Senate. Shut down the Senate, refuse to allow them to steamroll, and take this fight to every town hall, courtroom, and news outlet. Quote, shut it down. Indivisible tells us tonight that they've had their members calling the Senate, calling Democrats in the Senate all day, making that demand. They told us they are finding senators and their staffers to be very receptive to this message. It is against the law for Trump to have stopped this funding that Congress allocated. He thinks that that law doesn't count and it doesn't matter. So he did it anyway. For that matter, it's also illegal for Trump to have fired people at the National Labor Relations Board and the EEOC today. It is illegal for Trump to have fired the inspectors general from all those agencies the way that he did. All of those things are actually contrary to law. But in this administration, what are they trying to do? Delete the government and install a national CEO, a.k.a. dictator. So him acting in ways that are contrary to law, they see that as a feature, not a bug, right? They want to demonstrate that he does not have to follow the law. Because after all, we are deleting the U.S. government and replacing it with something else. Right? That is what they are offering. They think we're going to get over our dictator phobia and go along with it. Turns out we're not going along with it. Not in the courts, not in the Congress, not in the Senate, not in the states, not in the press, and ultimately, I think not in the streets. Nope, turns out not having it. And it does turn out that their intentions are as bad as we could have imagined, or maybe worse. But now, what did you see today? You saw them cave and mumble and try to take it back and say they didn't mean it.
Welcome to Backroom Brief. My name is Drew Pearson, where we discover into the forces shaping our society, politics, and future. These are my observations about the scale of impact. This wasn't a targeted budget cut. It was a massive, sweeping funding freeze that affected nearly every aspect of daily life. From veterans programs to food assistance, education, and even law enforcement, the order disrupted essential services overnight. The sheer breadth of its impact is what made it so shocking. State and local governments were blindsided. They had no warning and were left scrambling to assess the damage. Even the Trump administration seemed unprepared for the consequences, quickly reversing course on key programs once public outrage grew. The order was so sloppily written that it referenced cutting funds from the Green New Deal, a program that doesn't even exist. A president does not have the power to unilaterally freeze congressionally approved funds. This move is likely illegal. Legal challenges were immediately filed, and a judge temporarily blocked the freeze. If Trump had succeeded, it would have set a dangerous precedent for future presidents to override Congress at will. The rapid backlash forced the administration to walk back key parts of the freeze within hours. Activists and progressive groups launched campaigns urging Congress to take action, showing that public pressure can make a difference. This crisis revealed that when people pay attention and push back, they can influence policy, even in extreme situations. This wasn't just about budget cuts. It was an attempt to centralize power in the presidency and sidestep Congress. Trump has a history of removing checks and balances, including firing inspectors general and using executive orders aggressively. If this order had been allowed to stand, future presidents, regardless of party, could have used the same strategy to defund anything they wanted. This event serves as a wake-up call about the dangers of executive overreach. Whether you support Trump or not, allowing any president to unilaterally cut off funding sets a dangerous precedent for the future of democracy. Would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think was the most shocking part of this? Thank you for joining me today on Backroom. Please like and subscribe to the show so that we can bring more insightful shows. I'm your host, Drew Pearson,